Thanks. Well, for those of you I haven't met yet, my name is Ashley. I am a product director at LingoKids. And today I want to talk about design principles for kids. So what we've learned by designing a product that's for 2 to 8-year-olds and how that's a little bit different when we think about designing a product for their parents. So for those of you who haven't heard about LingoKids, our mission is to create equal opportunities around the world. So how do we improve access and quality access to kids' education? So what we are is a content platform, sort of like a Netflix for kids. So we have fun songs, games, videos, all under this umbrella of teaching English as a second language. When we talk about the product space, though, there's this lack of focus on kids. So we think about quick wins in terms of product retention. And you'll find things like push notifications, email, if I go to Starbucks, I have a rewards program where my 8th cup of coffee is for free. But when I'm thinking about a 2-year-old, well, 2-year-olds don't have email. They can't even read yet, right? And they don't really care about a promotion or getting something for free. So these types of strategies, well, they don't work for us. And if there's parents in the audience, I'm sure you guys will know that nagging kids and using these types of strategies just won't work for us in terms of a principle. So what we realized is that we actually have to build something fun. So how do you do that? How do you define what is fun for your audience and for your kids? And I think, Joshua, one of the speakers, had touched on this as well of, okay, it was so much easier when I was that age, I knew exactly what to build. Or now I'm talking to my users to find out, what do they really like, what do they don't. So today, we'll focus on 5 principles that we've learned by designing in this way. And the first is content that kids love. So content really is king in this space. And I mentioned, we really want to make this a fun application. Well, what makes something actually fun? How do you define it? There's some research out there, some studies that say, okay, for something to be fun, it has to have one of 5 elements, or it has to have an element of surprise, or please one of your 5 senses in a good way. And at LingoKids, what we've really realized is fun for us is, well, what are our kids and what are our users actually defining as fun, more so than what we can get out of a textbook of how we define it. So a fun example I want to walk you through is the game of hide and seek. So how many of you played hide and seek when you were growing up? Show of hands. Okay, and how many of you thought that game was pretty fun when you were a kid? Excellent. So one of my favorite games when I was growing up was hide and seek. And we said, okay, this is a great concept. How can we build this into a kid's app? So the kids, the characters run away, they hide, and the kids have to go find them. So we start with this idea, and we build something, and the character counts down from 10, they close their eyes, they open them, and all the characters have disappeared. Well, turns out you put this in front of a 3-year-old, and they have no idea what to do. So you say, okay, the characters are hiding, and they say, well, there's no characters. Or you say, okay, you're closing your eyes, you're counting to 10, and your 4-year-old's going to tell you, well, hey, Mom, my eyes are open right now. So when we thought about hide and seek and how to design it, we actually went through a lot of iterations for what the game should look like. And if we can, I'll show you a quick video of what this used to look like in our app. This is the original LingoKids from 3 years ago, where we have on the screen the characters fading into the distance. So they go and they hide, and we say, okay, we're trying different things where they disappear. And flash forward a couple years, and now what we do is an interactive play area for the kids. So on the screen, all of the characters are visible, so it's not this traditional hide and seek, but it's about exploration. What we realized was what the kids were telling us what was fun was they wanted to go and click on the tree and have the tree bounce. That was what got them really excited, not searching for the particular animal. So it's a cool way to see the transition of here's this thing as an adult that I say, hide and seek was so great as a kid, let's do it in an app, and you talk to a child and you find out something totally different. So as I mentioned when we started, hide and seek was one of our first games. And in the App Store, we were actually cross-selling standalone apps. So we had one for hide and seek, we had a birthday party game, and what we realized is this was a pretty negative experience for the kid. So if I've played the birthday party game and now I want to play hide and seek, well, I have to go find mom or dad and get the credit card and say, hey, there's this cool new game that I want to play. And that really defeated the purpose of LingoKids and being this self-directed learning experience. So what we did from a business model was say, hey, let's think about the Netflix of the world and create a content platform. So we moved all of our separate games and put them into a subscription model. So from a business perspective, this makes a lot of sense. Now we have monthly recurring revenue based on our products. But from a kid's perspective, it was also a big win. So instead of trying to cross-sell or upsell kids or put ads into our application, what we say is, hey, this is an ad-free space. This is for kids. So once you get this product, for the child, all they see is the LingoKids world. In terms of what we measure here, that was a huge win for us. So if we're looking at the graph here, on the orange line, we're looking at activities in the application, and our blue line is session time. So if you're designing an app or a kid's product, you're probably really familiar with tracking things like my monthly active users, what's my session time, maybe even a learning outcome. And what we saw was once we compiled all of these games into one application, we saw a huge spike in session time. So now we could get kids playing in the app for a lot longer. The second principle for today, and this is a really fun one, is putting a face on it. So if I'm thinking about kids gaming and kids education, there's a big push to make it personalized. So how do I actually connect with a kid on a human level? We talked about this a little bit earlier, and I think a question was asked about, how is this really different than TV? It's video content. Well, we know video is a really big lever in the kids space. They love it. They'll watch Peppa Pig or whatever it is for hours on end. But what we found is that we're missing some of the information when it's a passive interaction of, well, is the kid learning? Do they like it? Do they actually learn what the color red is or not? And we introduced My Teacher videos. So I have a teacher, Emma, in the application who becomes the face of LingoKids. So now with your child, she or he is actually working with an individual teacher as they guide them through the application. It's a really basic concept in theory, but it has a really powerful impact. So if I have teacher Emma welcome you and say, okay, today we're gonna learn how to spell my name. You'll see a clip of Emma, then it goes into, okay, I do a traceable for the letter E. Emma says, great job, keep going, and then we go and we draw the letter M. This is something that we're experimenting with at LingoKids, where we're designing interactive episodes. So now, taking the My Teacher concept, we have, okay, here's 2 minutes of the Ants Go Marching song. Now you actually get to play a picnic game, and we test you on some of the things that you just heard in a song, but it feels like it's one story that you're following throughout LingoKids. So being a product person myself, I'm obsessed with metrics and measuring how are we doing, do we actually implement something that improves the product. But one of the things that I love about LingoKids is we get a lot of qualitative feedback that helps us know that we're moving in the right direction. So this is mommy, Maribel. She's from the Philippines, and she wrote into us about her son, Calvin. Now, Calvin is delayed in speech, and he's really taken to LingoKids. It's really helped him. And his mother wrote in to say, Calvin loves teacher Emma, absolutely adores her, and we'd really appreciate it if teacher Emma could send a video saying hi to Calvin. From the customer success and product side, we're thrilled to do that. Absolutely, teacher Emma lives in New York. She sent a video to Calvin. He's thrilled. But what it also teaches us is that on the individual level, what kids are seeing for LingoKids, is not our subscription model. It's not, how much revenue we're making. But for them, it's, hey, this is teacher Emma, and I want to see Emma today. I want to tell her happy birthday or whatever it might be. And oh, by the way, it works for parents too. So a quick switch on the adult side of the application. So the way it works is in the kids space, completely ad-free. It's all about the games. And on the parent side, we have things like progress reports or a timeline of here's what your kid has done. This week they're going to work on colors and next week on prepositions. But we took this concept of personalization and decided, well, how can we make that work and how can we leverage that with adults as well? So if you think about a typical funnel in product, it might be how many people install my application, how many of them end up signing up for my service or starting a trial, and then of course, how many subscribe and do they keep coming back and resubscribing. So if I look at the first part of the funnel, I'm talking about onboarding, so the first experience in your application. Traditionally, we want to minimize the amount of steps it takes from you see my app and I want you to get in the game and actually explore. So these screens that we had were a welcome screen, enter your email and then you get a paywall to start your trial. So we took a step back and we said, okay, we know personalization is working for kids. How do we do that for parents? And we added in this additional step to personalize your experience. So we ask you, okay, your kid Anna, well, what's her level? What's her name? What does she like? And you get this screen that says your personalized program is being created. And then, okay, your course for your child Anna is ready. And what we saw, and here's a few screens to see what that looks like. So what level are they? What age? All the way into the paywall that they hit. And again, A/B experimentation is really huge in the industry of how can I actually make sure that what my hypothesis was true. And what we see is if we take on the blue side is a baseline, so the control group. So they have the 3 screens for onboarding. And the green is my experiment, so that's where I say, okay, I'm going to add in these additional screens for asking about your child. And we actually saw a really huge increase, especially in product. An 80% increase in your install to trial is a big deal. As you get more sophisticated and you grow as a company, of course, those wins are harder to find. But for us, that was a really big win to say, now as a parent, this course is for me, this course is for my child. The third, another fun concept is how do we bring Education 3.0 to life? So how do we bring in this idea of machine learning and adaptive learning to LingoKids? What we're starting with is adapting the platform based on the child's activities. So we can train certain algorithms on, well, what is their session time, or how often do they come back to the app, or what are their learning outcomes? So if I take child Marietta and she goes to the app and she likes teacher Emma better than teacher Meredith, we'll start to filter content that keeps her engaged. And if she then talks with Lisa the cat and she knows her fruits, but she doesn't quite know spelling yet, we start to pick up on what she's getting right and wrong, what types of activities, whether songs or videos, keep her more engaged. So that's something else that we're exploring of, okay, when we think about designing this, we want to design in a way in which each child actually has their own path. So this is not the 9 to 3 school model where everybody gets the same education, but how do I pick up on that unique path per kid? Number 4, so letting the children play. I think this was spoken about this morning too, of self-directed learning. So this idea of, okay, we have video, but now the big difference is that button in the middle of the screen where you can flip activities. Well, that's been really big for us as well. And I want to stop and explain this concept a bit. So when people hear ed tech, they often think of gamification. So I'm going to have leaderboards and points and scores of how well my kid's doing. But there's some really interesting studies that show that that's not the best way for kids to learn. So if I look at motivation, we might say that learning doesn't actually occur if there's no motivation. And interestingly, that's a big component of gameplay. So there's a natural component we can leverage of motivation and gameplay and how it works with education. So an interesting study done at Stanford was there was 2 groups of kids, and what they wanted to study was rewards and motivation. So kids that already had expressed interest in painting, they split them up and said, okay, for this one group, after they paint, we're going to give them a reward, and we'll tell them and say, okay, if you paint for an hour today, you're going to get pizza. And for the other group of children, there's no reward, it's not talked about. The kids paint equally as long. They wait a week, and they take those same 2 groups of kids, put them in a room, and ask them to paint. And the kids that had not received a reward in the past actually painted for 2 times the amount than the kids in the other room. So this type of study, what it shows is that those extrinsic motivators, they don't really work in education. They don't work for the long-term gain in LingoKids. So maybe I get them to come back tomorrow or the first week, but I don't actually get them to start using LingoKids as part of their lifelong or early childhood education. A way that we do this in the application is, instead of rewards, we talk about positive affirmation. So a way to increase motivation is to say, okay, great job, buddy, you're doing well, you got that right. And again, with qualitative data, what we see is, this was actually just yesterday, so I threw it in here. A parent reached out to us and said, my 2-year-old thrives on affirmation, so each time he hears that he's doing well, he just smiles and claps his hands. And that really captures the essence of what LingoKids is doing. Is we don't want to be gamification, we don't want to have a leaderboard. What we want to do is inspire in kids the willingness and the motivation to play. Now, we don't always get this right. So this is an example of when we violated one of our principles. If we're looking at the funnel again, install to sign up, we thought about, okay, well, during this trial period, it's so important for parents and kids to understand how to use the app or to use it in a certain way. So we spent a lot of time creating a tutorial that was, here's games that you can see, here's progress reports, and we implemented this tutorial and we saw a really negative experience for kids. So again, if I'm looking at A/B testing, and the blue is my baseline. So there's no tutorial, it's business as usual. The green is an experiment for, okay, I've introduced the tutorial for the kids. And what happens, you'll see immediately after launch, that those kids, they stop playing. They see this tutorial and it becomes, a parent's product, or they don't understand. So for us, that was, okay, hey, we have this principle of letting the kids play, of self-directed learning. We violated it, and oh, look what happened. So moving forward, what we really try to do is embrace that principle. Lastly, we'll talk about humans and the empathy component. So as one of the product directors at LingoKids, what I'm actually working on right now is the introduction of virtual tutoring. So if we have a content platform that has the games, the videos, the songs, we know that teachers are a really important process of kids' education. So how can we use this information that's digital and then pair them with an online one-to-one tutor who's going to work with them on taking turns, on listening, on practicing their accent? Why this has become a design principle for us is we see that when we have that, we actually are able to increase kids' interest in the application in general. So the way LingoKids works is we have 3 subscriptions. One is free. So we really believe kids across the world, if you can't afford it, no problem, you can still access some of our content. We also have a paid subscription to the application. And then we have our online, virtual tutoring. And what we see here is, okay, they're spending about 54 minutes in class, which means 2 classes a week. But they're also spending about an hour a week in the application itself. So what we've done by having a teacher to say, hey, for next class, make sure you watch this video, or did you get to play the hide and seek game? It was so fun, you should play this week. That shows a really big increase, 70%, in their ability to play in the app as well. And I was just having this conversation with a few folks right before this about screen time. Someone is doing something pretty interesting about, after a certain amount of time, they block the kids from playing. And I want to make sure here it's also clear at LingoKids, we don't recommend that your kid plays for hours every day. We actually ran an experiment where we said, hey, from AARP, it's recommended your kid plays up to 30 minutes a day. So for us, it's less about getting them in the app for extended time periods, but instead creating this habit where, okay, I have 2 classes a week, I maybe play in the app 2 times, and oh, by the way, this is the kid asking for this. So what's really awesome is if I think about language learning, this isn't something that they're being dragged to do, but I actually get to play and have this immersive experience, but I'm also having 2 hours of quality English instruction. So we'll wrap up here. These are our high-level design principles, right? So it's not exactly the technicalities of UX, But who as a company, how do we keep these principles in mind as we design our product? And you'll see these play out in other industries as well. So putting a face on it, if you think about customer service, that moved away from FAQs to now on most websites, you can start chatting and you're immediately chatting with Olivia or Sophie. You see the face and they have a conversation with you. It's also the same if we think about Netflix. It's a really self-directed experience, just like LingoKids. Or even, concepts with Amazon where, okay, if I need a replacement for my water cooler, I get it tomorrow. And with kids education, it's traditionally been this 9 to 6 model. And with LingoKids and with other players in EdTech, it's really on-demand education. So no matter where I am, I can be learning at any time. So wrapping up, the future of experience design and something that we're thinking about with LingoKids is really effective computing. So if I think about how education started really way back in the day, and it's Aristotle teaching Alexander the Great. So it's one-on-one, we're passing down information. Then more recently, it's become an application that's moved to a platform. Our current phase is about machine learning. So how do I use adaptive technologies in what I have? And where we're heading is that concept of empathy. So that relates to all of these design principles of if I can use something that's monitoring your face to know when are you engaged, when are you happy, when are you sad. That, to me, is really the exciting part of the space of where we're headed, is to use that so that for every kid, they're getting that unique experience. So thank you very much. I'm happy to answer any questions you guys have about LingoKids or about design.
Hi, I'm Adit, co-founder of Lingumi. And so I'm curious about your customer success role and how that's developed and like the different things you look to do.
Sure, absolutely. So at a startup, titles can be a little misleading. So we are a small company, so my role has been operations, product, customer success. So right now I'm the head of a product team, and it's in charge of the online or tutoring component. So the customer success aspect of that is how do we design it in a way where the customer is centric. So what do we have to do after class happens to watch it, to change our lesson plans? What does the experience look like in the app? So for us, customer success is how do we bring the customer focus into product. Well, thank you very much.